in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside the News. So glad that you are with us. My name is Guy Wehman, along with Frank Vernuccio and Ben Brunson. If you're watching us on YouTube or AUN TV, we've got Frank Vernuccio in the top left and Ben Brunson in the bottom middle. Ben's our anchor. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing just great. Pleasure to be back with both of you gentlemen once again.
Did you like the thing about the anchor there at the bottom, giving us a firm footing?
Yeah, just think of me as Walter Cronkite.
And that's the news. Okay. How you doing, Frank?
Doing well. Great to be with you both.
All right. Frank is our resident attorney on the program, and he doesn't want to admit that openly. But at the same time, we've all been fascinated by the Barrett hearings and what has been going on. And I'm telling you, Frank, she is one remarkably smart lady.
Well, I don't practice law. I now have a more honest profession. But I've got to tell you, I've seen a number of these nomination hearings going all the way back to Judge Bork. And I don't think I've seen anyone handle it as well as Amy Coney Bryant. Sometime early today, she passed the point where I think any normal human being would have jumped out of that table and delivered a punch to one of the senators. But she has kept her cool, she has kept her sense of humor, and she has answered each question thoroughly and appropriately. I think to the dismay of some of her inquisitors, they have not been able to rattle her in trying to say how she would rule on a case that is only a hypothetical. She has stuck to her guns and done it magnificently, frankly.
Ben, I think it was a concerted effort by the Democrats in the Senate there, the Judiciary Committee, to let's not attack her like we did Kavanaugh, because the election's a few weeks away. Because if they did that like Kavanaugh, they would be losing seats all over the place, Ben.
Well, this has proven to be a loser for them all the way around. Amy Coney Barrett is obviously quite brilliant, exceptionally well qualified for the job. She has done an incredible job, and it has shown up in the polling. Her selection was in the rush, if you will, the whole Democratic narrative of this rush to confirm was upside down for the Republican Party the day before the confirmation process started. And after just 2 days of hearings, and these were well watched. I think the numbers are off the charts, 60 to 70 million people watching these confirmation hearings. Mm-hmm. After a couple of days of watching her perform, there is now a plus 17% margin nationwide in favor of her confirmation. So that is a dramatic turnaround. It bodes quite well for the Republicans. It's going to help the president. They are going to confirm her. There's been nothing that Democrats have been able to do to damage her. Quite the contrary. You realize why Lawrence Tribe, the famous Harvard law professor who's 180 degrees opposite her in terms of political views, has always praised her as one of the brightest legal scholars out there, because she is, and it comes through. So this is a home run pick by Donald Trump, just what he needed, a great shot in the arm for his campaign. And the Democrats have conceded. They're treating this only as a free political advertising. And so they decided to try to take on the Trump campaign in terms of healthcare and this story about the eradication of all healthcare for Americans. It's a nonsensical story. The case in front of the court, if she hears it, is one of severability. It is a very limited case with regards to the ACA. The main issue on the ACA has already become a moot point because it's already gone, which was the mandate, which the court says what a tax, and in the last tax revision done in the first year of Trump's tenure, the mandate was done away with. So it's a moot point in terms of that level of the unconstitutionality that's been argued against the ACA. So this has been a home run, really, for Trump and the Republicans.
Frank, there's a couple points here that we need to bring out. Number one, people watching this, and Ben made some great points there, that the numbers have been off the charts. They have gotten a lesson in civics and the Constitution, number one. This has been a great shot in the arm for girls all across the nation, that they can be like
women, Guy, women.
Okay, women, females is what I was thinking of. I was thinking about young girls, though, too, in their high school years. You know, looking to go into what's going to happen in college and what
Right.
do I want to be when I grow up. I think that was more of my point, was the high school kids, because they say, I want to be like her when I grow up, because she's really presented herself well. And yes, you're right, Frank, women.
Well, of course, one of the things that comes across from Amy Coney Bryant is her fair-mindedness. She manages to actually bring up the exact points of how the law works, not her opinion on the law.
No.
And I think that is sort of the deciding factor. As hard as the Democrats have tried to pin her down to being an opinionated individual, she has discussed the law as a judge indeed is supposed to rule about it, not taking politics into it. Heaven knows the Democrats have tried to push her into a political discussion, and she has given them a lesson. She's taken them to school, indeed, on how a judge is supposed to think. It is a bit of a shock, I think, to the Democrat system when they understand, or are made to understand, that a judge is supposed to rule on the law, or as Amy said it, on stare decisis rather than on a political opinion. And I think that comes across to the viewers of this thing so clearly and so strongly that it just increases support for her in a tremendous way.
All right. Unlike Amy Coney Barrett, I do have more than just a blank sheet of paper here, which is probably one of her star moments, because that has been played everywhere. What an amazing audio visual that she gave us, Ben.
Well, it's just very clear how smart she is. A very intelligent woman, a brilliant woman. And look, she shares that, I think, with the late Justice Ginsburg, who herself was clearly a brilliant jurist, a very different philosophical approach to the law, but they shared a lot of that in common, including both women are inspirational to other women. And indeed, they should be inspirational to men too. But she's going to be a great justice, and she's going to be confirmed. The confirmation, looks like they're on track to confirm her prior to November 3rd, which I think is very important for the Republicans to pull off. It has motivated the base among Democrats, but it's also motivated the base among Republicans. So let's call that an even split as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's now move down the list here, because more has happened in the last week or so since we've last convened than just the confirmation hearings. We've got this 25th Amendment issue that Pelosi brought up. And then Trump floated this thing out. It wasn't for him. It's for Joe Biden, should he be elected, Frank. Interesting concept.
Yeah, I find it stunning that politicians as experienced as Nancy Pelosi would not realize the pitfall they're falling into by bringing this up. There's already suspicion across the country that Joe Biden was just basically a name, and that the real candidate would be Kamala Harris. She would be the one who would actually run the administration. Indeed, both Kamala and Joe Biden have had slips of the tongue where they talked about the Harris administration as opposed to the Biden administration. So when Nancy Pelosi brought up the 25th Amendment routine, the immediate thought everyone had, quite justifiably, was that this is paving the way to get Joe out of the way and put Kamala in the Oval Office. It is a really stunning act of political era that I don't think anyone really expected to see from the polished polls of the Democratic leadership.
You know something, Ben? Pelosi's been making quite a few little mistakes, but these little mistakes are starting to add up, and you wonder if she's having more Biden moments coming up here.
Well, she's 80 years old now, and she's acting her age, let's put it that way. So she doesn't seem to be on top of her game, much like the presidential nominee of the Democrats, He is a few steps behind, but she does not look good. And this was a monumental gaffe because it was clearly an attempt to tar Donald Trump when she threw this out there and baited the press. I'm going to talk about the 25th Amendment, but it was such a perfect setup. And the Trump team has really hit it out of the park as far as turning the tables, because everyone realizes that first, under the 25th Amendment, it's the vice president who has to initiate a claim against the sitting president. Most of the 25th Amendment is designed to set the succession for a nuclear war or a Holocaust or some bad event. Washington, D.C. gets nuked, that type of thing. That's why it was passed. It was a Cold War amendment. Upon the realization that we had to do something pretty serious given the Cold War realities of nuclear war. But the part of the 25th Amendment that covers removing a sitting president requires the vice president to initiate the process and for a majority of the executives in the administration to agree, which is nonsensical. So it obviously can't apply to Donald Trump. And so it was really a layup for the president and Trump's team.
Yeah, it really was. And, Ben hit some of these points right there on the head, didn't he, Frank?
Well, he certainly did. And I think the whole problem for the Democrats was enhanced by Kamala Harris's performance in the vice presidential debate. The smirking, the sneering, the almost lust for power that was displayed by Ms. Harris clearly made her a very unlikable figure. Indeed, if this was a race between Kamala Harris and Vice President Pence, I think the race would practically be over at this point. But the more the voters realize that this is indeed a race not between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, the better it is for the president.
Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News. This is our first segment. Ben, the COVID relief. And you talk about Pelosi blinking once or twice. She got into it with Wolf Blitzer of CNN, and Trump has actually trumped her again because he offered her $1.8 trillion. Not everybody in the GOP is on board with that, but he says, fine, I'll take you up to 1.8. Everybody says, take the bill. Even Yang says, take the bill.
Well, it's interesting because he did extricate himself from a tricky situation. When he announced unilaterally that he informed his team to stop negotiating, that was a mistake, let's face it. And it was used by the Democrats to say, oh, look, he doesn't care about the people. So it was a political cudgel he gave to the other sides, but he redeemed himself by coming back with his tweet of, go big or go home, and I'm on board with $1.8 trillion, which is a ridiculous amount of money. And I will say what I've said many times on the show, there is an answer to the woes facing so many millions of Americans. That's to open the economy back up. And we will fix this issue without the government having to spend more trillions. Let's not forget, we've already spent, I believe, $3.5 trillion above and beyond the normal $4 trillion budget this year in emergency spending. It's really, this is a financial buster for the United States. I'm overstating it, but boy, what a year we're having.
Well, you're our resident economist here, Ben. That's just about enough to cover our new broadcast facility, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we're now at, I think, top 27 trillion of federal debt, which is really staggering. We're in a realm 135% plus of our GDP in debt, and ultimately we're going to have to monetize that debt. That typically is what happens to countries that go there, which means we'll have inflation down the road when the true monetization of that debt takes place.
Okay, Frank, what are you going to do with $1.8 trillion?
Well, I had lunch today with a former negotiator for a major union.
If it was in New York, you probably cost that much.
Thereabouts, and that doesn't even include the tip. The fellow is a gentleman who has really not voted for a Republican in his life. And he brought up actually the COVID issue. And he said he believes that this is a clear demonstration that Nancy Pelosi simply doesn't care, period. The fact of the matter is, everyone believes that there should have been a clean bill. In Washington speak, a clean bill is just doing one thing. In this case, would have been providing dollars for individuals and businesses, and I believe the small businesses, and of course the airlines, to get them out of the doldrums, to get them back on their feet. Families could buy groceries and that sort of thing. Adding on, not just any other add-on for Pelosi, but adding on things that are clearly partisan political issues. For example, the elimination of voter security measures is a real slap in the face, his words, not mine, to workers and to small businesses across the country. Pelosi has misstepped dramatically on this one. I think she really has stepped in the wrong direction entirely.
All right. Boy, we could keep on going. There's a lot more that we're going to cover, but there's more to cover on our next segment as well. We're going to take a time out. You're watching us on AUN TV, on YouTube, listening to us on SoundCloud, and affiliates all across the country. We love you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.